I think it's important for people to realize that when we experience a trauma, that trauma is stored in our brain at the age of which we experience the trauma. So if you were 11 years old and you watched a horrific car accident occur in front of you and people died, when you're 25 and let's just say you're still triggered by driving, doesn't make sense. But what I'm feeling, that panic, I'm feeling it as a child. So if you experience a trauma at 11, but at 25, you're attempting to process it as an adult, you need to go back and clean it out as an 11-year-old.
I think that, those triggers, those trauma responses are a huge component that we really don't talk about enough. The more we are aware of, this isn't actually what I maybe need to be doing or mean to be doing or saying, but it's a response to something I experienced a long time ago. If we can slow down our thought process, we're more likely to identify like me doing X, Y, or Z isn't what I should do, but it's actually because when I was 11, that thing happened and I don't want that thing to happen again, so I'm going to push it away. We talk a lot about trauma, but we often miss how systemic silence amplifies its grip. I've seen survivors of gun violence asked to move on before their wounds have even scabbed, or caregivers burning out because their grief is labeled as secondary. These aren't just oversights, they're fractures on how we define who deserves to heal.
And those fractures cost lives. Gun violence survivors are up to 20 times more likely to develop PTSD, yet we still treat their pain as a political footnote rather than as a public health crisis. I've sat with parents who've lost children to school shootings and were handed pamphlets instead of purpose, and survivors who hide in their scars because, well, it could have been worse. The common thread, a world that says your pain matters, but only if it fits the narrative.
Schools mirror this. A child disassociates during a drill. It's behavioral. A grieving teacher is told to stay professional. The lesson, trauma only counts if it doesn't disrupt the system.
Politicizing pain abandons survivors. Therapy pushes resilience, not rage. Flashbacks are medicated, not understood. We debate stats while survivors beg for their stories to be heard.
This isn't about thoughts and prayers. It's asking who taught you your survival was too messy to witness. When survivors numb out to avoid becoming headlines, that's not avoidance. It's a reflex the world taught them.
So today we're breaking down how to heal when a world would rather debate trauma than witness it. We'll cover a few points, including why survivors, whether of gun violence, suicide loss, or secondary trauma, are often more silenced by politics, shame, and the myth that their pain wasn't bad enough to count. Number 2, invisible crisis of caregivers such as therapists, first responders, teachers who absorb the trauma daily but are taught to, just stay strong instead of grieve. Number 3, how trauma rewires the brain and why the healing process requires revisiting the age you were when it happened, plus practical tools like EMDR and breath work to reclaim your safety. And lastly, number 4, what Bulletproof, the book, really means. It's not moving on, but rewriting the script of survivorhood when the world reduces you to a statistic or a debate point.
Jill is a licensed professional counselor, childhood gun violence survivor, and one of the few experts specializing in the intersection of trauma and suicide loss.
After 20 years in practice, she now dedicates her work to amplifying survivor voices through a groundbreaking book. It's called Bulletproof, Healing After Gun Violence and Trauma, a first-of-its-kind guide that bypasses politics to focus on raw, real path to healing.
She's also a fierce advocate who's been featured in media nationwide, a clinician who's walked alongside survivors of mass shootings and everyday violence, and a storyteller who refuses to let pain be reduced to debate.
Her work doesn't just heal, it dismantles the myth that survival is synonymous with silence. Jill, welcome to the show.
Before we go ahead and get started, there is something that we do with all of our guests. I am on a mission to #BeHuman and destigmatize the human experience. So if you want to go ahead and share with us anything, it could be something recent, something long time ago, something that is just one of those like, oh, this is a very solid reminder that I'm a human. I'm going to give you a really quick one. I was meeting with somebody yesterday in the library and we were talking about teeth. And she was like, did you know about my tooth? And she just popped out one of her teeth. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to use that on the podcast because that was such a human thing that we think everybody has all their teeth. And then sometimes we just don't, that's part of being human. So Jill, welcome to the show.
Wow.
Do you have a human moment for us or thing that just, brought you back to your humanity?
Well, I'm going to say all of my teeth are actually like rooted in my mouth, so I don't have a circus trick for you. It's interesting that this question popped up this week because I had a moment that was really humanizing for me. It's maybe not as lighthearted, but I had a very, all of us have like a work wife. I know that's an old phrase, but we have a work bestie, or we know what that's like. We've had that person before, and my kind of professional best friend and my work wife actually died by suicide 4 years ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It was horrible, you guys. It really was. It just kind of catapulted a lot of decisions that I made in my life after that. But it just it followed me for a long, long time. And the 4-year anniversary of her death was last week. And I woke up on Sunday night in the middle of the night and sat straight up in my bed and went, oh my God, I forgot. Like
the day had closed and you were in bed?
The day had gone by 3 or 4 days. Oh. And here's the thing for me that I'm just be human is that, I pride myself as a grief specialist in being really good about remembering dates for other people, about honoring other people, about making, I have a list. Like I call my friends, I call some of my ex-clients and say, I know this week is hard for you. I know da-da-da-da. And in my own life, like I forgot a pretty pivotal moment. It really sat uncomfortably with me.
I was just going to say, how's it sitting with you now? Yeah. Are you sitting okay with it now?
I didn't rush it and I didn't make myself to come to a conclusion about it. I didn't let myself off the hook. Let me just say that until probably yesterday. And I looked at it and I reframed it of, wow, I think this is a sign of my healing.
Healing.
Right? Like this event used to be woven into the sweater that I wore every single day. And this must mean that as much as I love her and that event will have always changed who I am, it's not the shadow that follows me anymore. So then I kind of started to celebrate it.
Yeah. And I think it also is indicative that they're with you every day in all of your decisions, not just on this anniversary. And I think the anniversary does shift from like this monumental once a year thing to it dissipates to being more of a all day, but less harsh, right? The other thing that makes me think about in hearing your story too is this grief component and how sloppy and messy and unnatural it can feel. And that you can feel grief and relief in the same sort of moment. You can feel, we feel a lot of times guilt in that grief process. Like I feel guilty, I forgot this date, but it's still part of your grief process to really process and not feel shame in it, but understand you're going through it, right?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. That was such a gift. And healing is truly not linear. It is such a roller coaster. And, unfortunately, suicide has also impacted my life in many different ways. And it's weird because it does just show up sometimes out of the blue where you're like, I haven't thought about this moment, and like a color or a picture or a song or smell just like reignited it, right?
Yep. Exactly.
All right, so let's go ahead with that. Let's get started. Your journey from survivor to therapist to author is very profound, admirable, and very inspiring. Can you share how Bulletproof came to be?
Bulletproof came to be because my work wife took her life. And I will say that I was a grief and trauma specialist for 20 years. I worked specifically with survivors of suicide. I was one of the only people in the country that actually specializes solely in working with survivors of suicide. So for those that may not know, a survivor of suicide is a friend or family member that's left behind after somebody dies by suicide. And so that was my specialty. And then when I lost Leslie, or the world lost Leslie, right? And we were in the suicide space, and I still lost Leslie, I really had to step back and reprioritize and go, this work is hard. And, I preach so much about vicarious trauma and how much am I a vicarious trauma victim myself, and what do I really want to do with my life? And the answer has always been, it's been to tackle some of the gun violence epidemic in this country. I've tried to do it one other time before. 15 years ago, I was naive. I really thought that I was going to, charge onto the Capitol. I really thought, you guys, it's like laugh-worthy, that I was going to be written in the history books because Jill McMahon was going to go in
Was
there
going to figure it out.
Oh, yeah. And for some reason, Daren, they were going to listen to me. I'm not really sure. I had a rude awakening after doing some of that political work locally for about 2 years, and I had to step away from it. And so after I experienced the surprising loss of my dear friend, I just became impassioned again. And so I closed my practice, and I can't not be in the helping field. It's in my DNA. And so I thought, this is my time. I'm going to write the book, and I'm going to come at it differently. I'm not charging Capitol Hill, right? I'm not coming at it politically, because that's not working. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hopefully serve as a voice for all of those people that have been impacted by gun violence. So that's what I've really dedicated the last 2 years of my life to doing.
I don't know if you are aware, but probably not. People who have listened to this before are aware, but my husband is a police officer in the town we live in, and he's the mental health guy. And so much of what you're saying resonates within his job too. And he goes to people who are in crisis and psychosis and all these other things, but he himself struggles sometimes with seeing his own need. Where I'm like, dude, say what you would say to your people in society, but to yourself, or the things you would suggest to the people if you went to a call, do it for yourself. But it truly is. And I think, and you and I will talk later about my mission and what we're really doing. But I think that so much that we find medical professionals, first responders, therapists, teachers, all of these people who are serving our communities, we think that they are experts in these ways, or that they can handle unlimited amounts of trauma. I mean, my husband, between one therapy session to another, he'll be like, cool, I've had 3 deaths. Do we have time to really process these 3 deaths? And his therapist is like, we have an hour. No, we need to see each other every other day if we're going to do this, Right. And I think it's a huge, huge problem in our country that we really need to examine on a deeper level. So I appreciate you bringing that awareness.
Thank you. I think you bring up something really important, and I don't want to hijack the conversation, but I think everybody on this call can understand you being the spouse of a police officer, Daren, working in the field of mental health, and myself, I've been a first responder light. I reported to the scene of suicides for about 5 to 7 years. PD would call me, I would report to the scene, and I would sit with families until the medical examiner's office came and removed the body from the scene. And Daren knows, even if I hadn't had that experience, just sitting across from somebody in a room that is sharing nuance, detailed information with you, and watching their guttural response to that trauma. Sometimes we think that we are exempt from because we should know better. So when you were giving that example of your husband, it is interesting. I run across a lot of mental health professionals that are like, but I should know how to take care of myself because I teach this. I preach it. So we kind of hold ourselves to this higher standard. Therefore, we're often the last ones to go in and seek support.
This is why I am on such a mission to be transparent with all of the different challenges and struggles and traumas that I've collected over the years, because human is human is human. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. There's always ways that we can help our brain process it better. But at the end of the day, these things are hard. The things that we're working through in society is really challenging for all of us. And we all need the support, especially those who are seeing it at a high level, high rate, right?
Gun violence survivors are often silenced by the noise of the debate. For someone who's thinking, my pain doesn't matter because it wasn't a mass shooting, what do you do with that?
First and foremost, validate. That is such a great question, Daren. And that's one of the main reasons that I wrote the book, was to validate the experience of any survivor of gun violence. So first and foremost, we need to define what that is, right? I had mentioned earlier that suicide by firearm they're actually in the statistics of gun violence episodes. A lot of our country doesn't know that. That's relatively new in the last 2 to 3 years. And so I kind of open up the definition. If you're a suicide survivor by firearm, it's a little different by firearm because of the lethality of it, because of the immediacy of death once you have a firearm in your hands. You're also somebody who is struggling or hurting, right? I want to also acknowledge, we just talked about it, first responders, PD, FD, EMTs. Rarely does anybody ever mention the emergency room doctors and nurses, but we are actually seeing an increased rate of suicide in that population because of what they're holding.
The other thing, going back to this conversation, I almost said this before, but I truly believe mental health and gun violence are so entwined, because I think about like this Black guy in our police officer situation that we keep seeing historically on repeat in our country. I am all for policy, and going back to you're talking about politics. I do so much stuff locally for policy reform and all of these things that we need, and I truly believe in it. I don't think we're going to get solutions, though, until both the Black man and the police officers coming to those situations have mental health resources. They are all coming here in fight, flight, freeze. We need them here in their frontal lobes. And if you think about that concept on repeat in our country, in all these different, whether it's our divorce rate to our, having an argument at work or whatever, right? Like, we can all see that we need to be here in this frontal lobe before we can ever make any of these gun violence things go away, regardless, right? Like, ultimately, I think that's our core focus. We need to be focusing on society.
And it gets lost. So I'm going back to Daren's question and looping that in because it is a part of the equation. Politics comes into the conversation almost immediately when there's been a gun violence event, right? So after I kind of normalize, validate, and remind people what the definition of a gun violence survivor is, then I don't say one word about politics, at least when it comes to my work with representing a survivor's voice, because the survivor gets lost in the entire equation the second that we go, oh, well, you know what, that shooter must have been mentally ill. Where did that shooter get their gun? I know, Daren, that comment, if you're in this profession,
they're always mentally ill.
They're always,
trauma. We all have trauma. We are all like struggling with our mental health, period. Like, I just feel like we need to name that. Like, mentally ill is such a cop-out. Yes, we all have mental health.
We all have mental health issues.
Varying degrees of it, but like we all have it.
Well, and I will tell you, that comment is only stigmatizing reaching out for services even more.
I want to make it so you can say to a friend, you need to go to therapy. And that feels like a very nice hug where you're like, oh my gosh, you care about me enough that you want me to be better.
Erin, I think we're getting there. I think we're getting closer, girl. I really do feel in my time practicing, which has been a minute, I'm not young, I've really seen a huge, huge shift before pandemic. Now, since pandemic, it has, we've
opened Pandora's box
It's opened Pandora's box. But if we talk about people like your husband, HR, and, that have to deal with HR, that are coming from a corporate world, that are in the helping field, I agree with everything you just said. And I'm going to add an and or a but to that. What I have noticed is there are quite a few members of that population that also have a lot of shame wrapped around asking for mental health services. So not only do they fear that it will go on their record and it will taint their professional career if they ask for support, some of them, again, believe that they should be able to heal themselves, that they are stronger than the average human being. And what would it look like if my brothers at the fire station don't receive mental health services, but I have to? What does that say about me? Am I weak? So they can also be their own worst enemies within that fight.
So this is two things. Number one, this is why our curriculum is anonymous and why it's like a self-driven curriculum so that nobody has to know. But number two, I think it's fascinating, but the mental health facility I went to, they require medical professionals, first responders, vets, military, any of those folks who are really hard to get in there. I was only there for 4 days inpatient, but they're required to be there for 30 days at the bare minimum because they are so exponentially harder to get in there. Their trauma is so much deeper and harder to work through. And really those stigmas are so entrenched in their culture and who they are that it's like literally breaking a boulder, right?
That makes a lot of sense.
But going back to Daren's question too, I think that when you think like my pain doesn't matter because it wasn't a mass shooting or whatever, I kind of go back to, and I experienced that, right? I was in a school shooting. It was gang related. One student shot, no fatalities, barely made local news. And so part of me was like, should I even call this a school shooting? Well, it was one of our students that was shot. So yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't I, right? Well, it was outside the building. They were eating lunch on the grass. Okay. I went through, again, going back to this, survivor's grief kind of, you try to figure out where your reality is. But one of the things that I keep coming back to is that it is your first time experiencing whatever it is. And I say this to parents all the time. If your kid's breaking up with a friend, it might be their first time experiencing it. So you might not empathize with their reaction or their emotional reaction to that situation because we are like, what's the big deal? But same thing, if you are in a traumatic event, like a shooting or anything like that, it's super important that we give ourselves that grace and we let ourselves be human. And, no matter what the situation is, if it's not a mass shooting, consider yourself very lucky, but also still allow yourself to feel those those feelings and go through that process.
It is a process. As you just said, it is a process because we go through all of that. What did I just witness? Is it really that big of a deal? I didn't get shot. The gun wasn't pointed at me, right? Right, Daren? The gun wasn't what am I complaining about? And it's interesting the timing of this interview, you guys, because I told you I'm in Maine for the summer and I'm actually audio recording the book. And so for me, I'm living the book all over again. And I'm reminding myself of the things that I wrote, 18 months ago. And I'm just now diving into the audio recording about vicarious trauma and secondary trauma victims. And I was giving an example about a woman who called me out of the blue several years ago and said, I don't know who else to call, but my husband is a maintenance worker at an apartment complex. And he had to go in and clean up after a suicide. And he has not been the same. He is a shell of a human being, but he's not validating his discomfort, his trauma, because all he can say to himself over and over again is, I'm not the family of the person who died. Who am I to complain, to be in pain? It's not about me, it's about them. And so, that's just one minute example. And there are thousands and thousands of those individuals in our culture.
Veterans all the time.
There is this old adage, specifically when it comes to suicide, that if we talk about suicide, we're planting the seed. There could be nothing that is further from the truth. So, the same goes for gun violence. We don't talk about something, we sweep it under the rug. It doesn't make the issue go away. It only makes people feel invisible. And so let's talk systemically. More people that feel invisible fester, become unhealthy, and can become the people that either die early of disease or they will act it out themselves because they need to express what they're experiencing in some way. But if culture does not validate their experience and they're not taught to believe that they have a voice that people are comfortable listening to, that's valid, right? So that is why in the book, I really intertwined suicide loss and gun violence. Yes, because, suicide by firearm is the number one cause of gun violence death in the country. 59%, I believe, of gun violence deaths are firearm suicide. So it's important for people to realize that that is a part of our data. But at the same time, because those two populations in my 20 years of service and work are the two populations that feel the most unheard and invisible. Because we, maybe not the three of us on this call, but I'm going to probably venture to guess some of your family members, some of your neighbors are uncomfortable having conversations with these individuals because we don't know what to do with it. So we'd rather avoid a conversation, especially the ones that aren't rainbows and sunshine, than get in the nitty-gritty with somebody. It's interesting because I heard one of your earlier podcasts, and it was about trauma. And your guest had said something to the effect of, did you bring that individual food after the traumatic event occurred? Because if you did, great. But what I want you to do is be able to sit next to that person and actually look them in the eye and sit with the details. Be able to sit with their emotions. Yeah, just hold it. Just hold space with them.
People realize that there's not good answers to these, but and I'll say me, I'm afraid to not have the answer to a question that has no answer. And it's like, even as a therapist, I have these all the time. Sometimes it's like, there is no easy answer for this, but we can sit in it.
I'm sure Daren would agree. You know, we love to teach people to say, like, do you want me to fix this for you, or do you want me just to listen to you? Right? Daren's smiling because that's a very therapeutic thing to say, and it's brilliant.
I do it in my relationship, my dating relationship. Even doing the work, though, like, we can still inadvertently step on something with no intention of stepping on it and still cause injury. Erin, when you're like, I've done the work, it's like, even having done the work, it's not a perfection process.
It's not.
Okay, so I got a question for you, being a therapist, and really, I guess, human to human here. You've written about compassion fatigue, specifically with clinicians, but this can be law enforcement, fire, all of it. How do you help people grieve when their job expects them to stay strong? This is kind of where we were maybe 15 minutes ago.
So I have a couple fun techniques that I do. You know, first off, as we've mentioned many times before about this stubborn clientele that is us for the most part, or helpers, it's getting them in the door. Right? I'm not going to psychoanalyze you. Again, I'm not going to send any reports to HR. If they make it there, it's not my doing by any means. I'm not here to cause you any type of harm. But what I have learned works best for them is to ask them to write. I ask them to write because it feels like it's disarming. I'm not asking them to dig really, really deep and pull out every horrible scene that they've ever seen, that they've ever witnessed. I'm not asking them to relive, the person that they lost right in front of their eyes. I ask them to do a 5-minute writing exercise.
This sounds like a cognitive processing therapy exercise.
It is, and they don't even know it is. It is, and they don't even know it is. It's a little bit of trickery.
We teach something very similar in our curriculum, and I would just take it one step further and say, like, writing a letter to yourself in those times and talking to yourself like a friend is sometimes a great way to do it. And I think it can depend. I mean, I think you're getting there, Jill, where there's ways in which, my husband wrote to his dead mom, and, there's ways in which you can really make it impactful.
And it's less frightening. It's really less frightening, right? I think some people that are experiencing compassion fatigue, first of all, I need them to step outside of the role that is creating fatigue. So not only are, once I can get them in my little grip, if I can get them in my grip, which I think is 50% of the equation, right, Daren? It's 50% just getting somebody to agree to be brave enough to come in and share with you. We may do a writing exercise or two, and I'm going to really ask them to look at their balance. Because here's the deal, guys. I mean, based off of your initiative, from what I understand of it, I know that you already know this, but we have all, in the United States at least, fallen into this trap of producing. The more we produce, the more we are worth as a human being, not financially, but respect. The more I output, the more people value me as a good person.
This hits men, I could be wrong, but I think this hits the males a bit more because it's like, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Daren. What do you do? First question, like that's almost guaranteed male communication is like, what do you do? Not how many kids do you have? What do you do for fun?
So Daren, it's funny. My husband and I just had this conversation this weekend. We were away and we were having a serious conversation about, the different ebbs and flows that our 30-year marriage has been through. And I can say it now because he's not that same person. But I was like, that first 10 or 15 years, when I would get ulcers because I didn't know who you were going to be when you walked in the door at the end of the night, based off of how your day went, and he got it, right? He looked at me, again, poor guy is married to a therapist, and his mom is a social worker. But I know. But he got it now. I could not have had this conversation with him then. And he just said, he goes, well, in all honesty, yeah, back then, I felt like I needed to prove to the world my worth. And so, I knew you loved me. I knew you loved me. So I didn't have to prove myself to you. But when I wasn't at home, so I'm like, 90% of your energy every day went to proving. And I'm going to take that back to, as a mom of a boy, I'm going to take that back to all of us, because what has culture taught young boys from the time they're 5, 6, 7 years old? Tommy, what do you want to be when you grow up?
What do you want to be when you grow up?
And then dads, when the kids get their first job at a movie theater or at Target, go, you know what, son, you need to start setting yourself up for success because you're going to have to support a family someday.
Just to go off of that, when you think about the American dream, right? Like what is the American dream? It's not necessarily just designated to be a messaging for me as a woman, but it's definitely, if Daren is a man, like the American dream is something you could achieve and is your path that you're supposed to achieve. I think the other thing that I think about in this equation, because destigmatizing this work for men is definitely a huge challenge that we talk about a lot in this work. But I do think that also just like in general, where was I going with this thought? I am totally spacing right now. We're going to have to edit this out because I don't know.
I like it.
Going.
Keep it in because you're human. Being human.
Hashtag be human. Okay, keep it in.
Human.
Keep it in. Yeah, my ADHD is like, my thoughts are so fleeting these days. But I think that like, I know what I was going with is that what is that a goal, right? Like we think about like, in your life, we have these goals that we're supposed to achieve that are very arbitrarily designated for us based on society. And I think like my father, he is a very successful man. And so if you tell him, go to therapy, he's like, why would I go to therapy? I have achieved the American dream. I have made a lot of money. I have a house. I have done the things that the messaging has told me since the day I was born. So like, why? I'm not broken. Well, no, we're not broken. No, none of us are broken.
I'm going to ask Jill, give us one other exercise from your book. Writing is a great one. What's another one? Like, I just want to give you a second to kind of talk through a few of those points.
My favorite things when it comes to trauma healing, probably across the board, is going to be EMDR. So I'm assuming that most of your listeners, if they listen to you, have heard of EMDR. It's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's a very impactful modality for trauma. It's not talk therapy. And it's, as a gun violence survivor myself, I will tell you, it is the one thing that helped me regain control over my trauma.
Our brain's a filing cabinet. When we experience trauma, we shove the papers just into this filing cabinet down here in this fight, flight, freeze part of our brains. And we potentially just leave it there and we respond in trauma responses based on that. What EMDR is it's very tactical in bringing that paper out of your filing cabinet where it's incorrectly placed. And it's a way to sort of reprocess it, go through that again, think through it from an older perspective, a frontal developed lobe perspective, whatever it might be. Fix the corners that are all smudged, whatever, tape it, whatever you need to do, and then really filing it back into their frontal lobe where your paper should be in that filing cabinet.
So that is a great analogy, and I use the filing cabinet a lot. So it was, and I thought it was original, Erin. So it's apparently not, because you use it too.
It was. She's read Bulletproof.
And now it's not, Daren. It was, and now it's not. So I'm going to add a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit to that. I think it's important for people to realize that when we experience a trauma, that trauma is stored in our brain at the age of which we experience the trauma. So if you were 11 years old and you watched a horrific car accident occur in front of you and people died, when you're 25, and let's just say you're still triggered by driving in the mountains. I witnessed a horrible car accident going up I-70 when I was a little kid, and now I hate driving in the mountains still, right? And so it doesn't make sense, but what I'm feeling, that panic, I'm feeling it as a child. So if you experience a trauma at 11, but at 25, you're attempting to process it as an adult, you need to go back and clean it out as an 11-year-old. And so that's kind of what EMDR does, because it's stored with less cerebral development. It's stored wherever you were when you experienced it. So it's actually, we're making it sound a tad bit more painful than it is. The process is actually
no pain
easy.
Involved. Promise.
It's not painful. It's actually mind-boggling. You're like, what am I doing here? This doesn't make any sense. And it is probably what I have witnessed to be the most effective technique for helping somebody regain control of their life again. I would say another thing that I love to do, which is not psychology-based, it is psychology-based, but it's not a modality, it's not a technique, is I really help people learn how to breathe to calm their nervous system. Again, a life changer. We talk about it in the book. It is something that everybody can learn to do. It is something that everybody can practice, and it is something that will absolutely benefit anyone, trauma or not. You want to learn how to stop flying off the handle. You want to learn how to get rid of your road rage. You want to learn how to stop crying in the office because it feels shameful and embarrassing. Or you just want to learn how to breathe through those scary moments, like when you go to a movie theater and you're checking out every exit because you're afraid that a shooter might come in. It's diaphragmatic breathing, and it's so within everybody's grasp to learn.
And I'm going to talk about two things with those. Number one, my husband is a police officer. That is the very first thing as the mental health guy. That's the first thing he does on every single call. And I want to talk really quickly about the science of it, right? You're in trauma. You're here. You're not thinking well. You're not thinking straight. You're not doing the things you mean to be saying and doing, right? And breathing is a great way for us to slow down our thoughts, process the emotions, and try to get cognitively online if we're able to in those moments. There's also a lot of science around, if we deep breathe and really fill up our lungs, we are able to, there's a gland that's right where your ribs cage comes together. And when we expand those lungs, it will really help that gland to release those happy juices. So lots of really great science there. But I think, again, like really helping your brain to slow down is the best thing. And then the other thing, I remembered what I was going to say before, but it still relates to this, is trauma responses. I don't think we all recognize how much of our lives are really ingrained in trauma responses or responses to our lived experiences. And if like compassion fatigue, going back to that ideology, if we can understand where we are responding in trauma responses, we can get rid of some of that compassion fatigue. Same thing, in any of this conversation, really, the more we are aware of this isn't actually what I maybe need to be doing or mean to be doing or saying, but it's a response to something I experienced a long time ago. If we can slow down our thought process, we're more likely to identify like, ooh, me doing X, Y, or Z isn't what I should do, but it's actually because when I was 11, that thing happened and I don't want that thing to happen again. So I'm going to push it away, right? I think that, those triggers, those trauma responses are a huge component that we really don't talk about enough.
Jill, we just want to say thank you so much for being here as we start to wrap up. I know Erin always has one or two more questions for you here at the end. So Erin, I'm gonna turn that over to you.
So Jill, if you could erase one societal rule about trauma, or it doesn't even have to be like a rule per se, but ideology or thought, what would it be?
There is not one right way to heal from a trauma. Just because you weren't traumatized doesn't mean somebody else isn't.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is really amazing to talk to you. And I feel like you are a kindred spirit here with me, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you offline. So if listeners or viewers want to connect with you or support your work and get a copy of Bulletproof, how can they go ahead and do so?
You can look at my website, which is jillmcmahoncounseling.com. There is a link to the book there, but the book is also on Amazon. And Goodreads. Like I said, I am recording the audiobook now. That will be out in September, but please, I would love anybody to read it, write a review about it, get the word out. I'm trying to get it into schools and universities, all of the above.
Thank you to everybody who's listening and watching. Please, please, please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on post notifications so you never miss an episode. If you're listening on your favorite podcast directory, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. That really helps us to spread our mission. If you have any expertise in health, education, social justice, any of the various topics that we talk about and you would like to join us on this show, feel free to email Jay, our producer, at Unplugged at undomindset.org with Undo Mindset in the subject line. We are always looking for voices like yours to amplify. And don't forget to share this episode with somebody who might find it helpful. If you know somebody who's been involved in any suicidal ideations, gun violence, we covered so many topics in this conversation. Getting this word out could really save lives, help people who are going through hard, similar things, but also really supports our mission and helps us grow. So we appreciate any and all engagement you have with our podcast.